We have some level of competency here on the podcast. Welcome to the Disrupt Education Podcast. I'm Peter Hostrawser, and that is Alli Privitt. How you doing, Alli?
I don't know what side you're going to be on. I'm doing well.
Yeah, I know.
And I know, like, whenever the videos come on, I'm like, am I looking at Peter in this one, or am I looking away from him? You never know. We are coming off of a very unique podcast that we wanted to bring to you all for months. So if you haven't gone and listened to Josh Scuba's episode from last week, and his message is so disruptive. Like, since being on the podcast, I don't think I've heard a message that has quite put me on my heels as much as his in terms of just timeliness. In just to kick it off, when there have been so many conversations over the years with technology and growing up in a technological world where I would say, like, I remember when, I would go out and play and I wouldn't be thinking about the next screen I would be on. And at some point, I'd be like, oh, that's what real freedom was. That's what childhood was. And what really pierced my heart was thinking about kids today. They don't necessarily have that, and they may not have even had a choice. And that really got me thinking. What about you, Peter? What was kind of like something that just, like, what even like made you want to get him on the podcast? Because I know, but tell our listeners.
Yeah, well, honestly, it was how he engaged an entire room of consumers, like of social media consumers. I didn't have to like do my normal routine at the beginning of a class. It was like, I was like, go ahead, man. And he started, I gave a quick introduction to him in each one of the classes, but when he started, everybody was just kind of like phones down and was like, what's this guy talking about? He was engaging from step one. And, like you said, he was like, I think the one thing that got everybody to do it was, he was like, you're consuming, your attention has been stolen from you. That still didn't get it. And then it was like, and guess what? It's probably not your fault. And then everybody was like, wait, what? And that was it. Like, and it wasn't like the sales hook, it was the truth, right? And it was such a truth bomb, kind of like the way that you engaged in thinking about it. And I engaged in thinking about it because I was like thinking, these kids will never see a rotary phone, because I'm that old. And then you're thinking, well, why would they? Does that make it better, or does it make it worse? And then, so like you said, all these emotions come into play. And then, just the authenticism of, his message. And I'll link it into this episode if I didn't on the last one, but the first rant that he had is very, very powerful. He didn't show it in the presentations. He showed a little bit of it, but he didn't show the whole thing. And it basically, you're watching somebody actually find their why in life. Like, it's very cool. It was very cool.
When you think about kind of unplugging from this machine, or the Matrix, or however you want to view it, his kind of rant post that put him on the map felt like that. It felt like he had like unplugged himself and was like alive and awake for the first time. And I think it is so easy to be lulled into a false sense of kind of ease and comfort in social media. And it is so easy to, in any kind of silence or gap, to fill it with social media. And you're not even aware of it, because it's been for me and you, it has been a gradual increase into our lives. Like I never felt like social media was controlling my time or my attention until suddenly it was.
Mm-hmm.
And um I even listening to him and his experience, it's like that's why I think the message is so timely, is because it's like you don't even realize like how it can kind of seep in until it reaches this like mass, this tipping point, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak, of like it's too much. And now I'm sad all the time, or I'm downtrodden, or I'm depressed, or I'm not in tune with how I'm really feeling. And then you seek this quick dopamine hit, right?
Yeah.
This like rush, this instant gratification, but then you seek it more and more and more often. Like I remember this statistic from back in the day of like, oh, people pull out their phones like 10 times in an hour. And I remember thinking, wow, that's crazy.
Right.
And people will pull out their phone 10 times in 10 minutes now.
Yeah.
Like that wouldn't even impress anyone nowadays. They'd be like,
Mm-hmm.
oh wow, that's actually low.
Right, right, yeah. So I think along with that, I remember when the phone, like the iPhones were coming out and that, right? So I'm just kind of going to go back into my history of it. It was the iPod and everything, and then it went to like iPhones and everything. And then you would see people um on commercials sitting outside like watching the game like on their phone, or watching a show on their phone, and I'm like, this is so dumb. Why would anybody do this? Right? It's a beautiful day. I remember the commercial to this day. They're like somebody sitting in a like nice outdoor cafe, look like in New York or somewhere, and they're just watching this little phone, and I'm like, how ridiculous is that? And now it's here, right? So but I still go back to those moments and I try to figure out, okay, what am I using this for? And yes, there are times when I consume myself. However, it's like I've made this thing in my head where I have to create 4 times, 5 times as much as I consume, right? So when I look at my numbers, and I do on my phone, you look at your stats all the time. And by the way, I think it's over 10 hours a week on average that teenagers spend like on TikTok alone. I think I saw 9.5, but that's a week. I'm thinking it's probably more now on average. But anyway, so like I look at those numbers and I'm like, okay, I was on like Instagram for this amount of time, but I know I was like uploading, maybe some, things that are happening and creating. But you're very cognizant of it. And I think what Josh does is make students aware of it. And then they can start to have the freedom to make decisions, right? It's just like you're supposed to do this, but you don't know why you're doing it. And then now, like when somebody gives you that worldview change, which was his post, was a worldview change. I think it just gives younger people the opportunity to see and to feel differently. I had a girl, 2-3 weeks ago. She got her phone taken away, and I looked at her in class, and she was smiling, and I haven't seen you smile all year. And I didn't say it in front of everybody. I just kind of told her that, it's not like I'm going to announce that in front of everybody. I was like, I haven't seen you smile all year. She's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, you're always just looking down like intently at your phone, and it's not here. And she does now. From that point on, she realized, and I was like, do you now know what Josh said? And she was like, oh my gosh, I get it. Like she still consumes, but it's different. So, and yeah, Josh brought it.
It is different, and it's like the stages of awareness of a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't solve a problem you aren't aware of, right?
Yeah.
If you are, it was really interesting when he was talking about how, himself and others in the Gen Z generation
Mhm.
have this large sense of disillusionment because they felt like they've grown up and only heard all these negatives and things that are wrong with the world, and it's front and center all day, every day. And social media is a place where they can watch funny videos and kind of not think about maybe all of these pressing global problems that they
Mhm.
don't feel any connection with, other than it's just been kind of put upon them. But then they're they're not even realizing that by like switching to this social media environment that is grabbing their attention, and people make a lot of money from that attention, that it then can spark all other sorts of issues. And I can remember so many young women in my classes that when phones, like my first year teaching, it was maybe like half of the kids had phones, and then
Mhm.
by year 5 it was like odd if they didn't have phones, every
Right.
single one. For sure by junior year. And then it was like my last couple years in the classroom, every student as a freshman had phones. And I I can just remember the change of seeing when girls got their phones, how much more they cared about how they looked
Mhm.
and what they wore. And I mean, that's always like, a huge part of the social environment in high school. But the comparison game, I just remember this one girl telling me, like she felt like she had to watch these makeup tutorials so that she would be liked
Mhm.
at school.
Mhm.
Like that was the message that she probably didn't even realize like what she had said, but like, right, she was internalizing that she wasn't good enough based on what she was watching on a screen. And it's like such a formative year, such formative years. Josh
Right.
totally talked about this. And like they don't even necessarily have a choice of what is being thrust upon them and
Mhm.
how that could influence the trajectory of their mental health, their social health, their like emotional regulation. Like all of that is so critical at those ages. And we're just handing them a device that can impact every area of their well-being.
Mhm.
And there are consequences to that. There's also opportunities
Mhm.
to kind of redesign that usage, which is what Josh, and why I think his message is so powerful, is because it's like waking you up to what could be happening.
You mentioned the Matrix, so I'm thinking, like when they unplug Neo, right? Like he's like, "What?" Like it's, and then you're in this pod. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things. It was kind of like that, and the three areas that he talks about being human with it is, I have them written down here somewhere. Basically being a creator, right? And I identify mostly as a creator, but a curator is meaning like you're putting and then putting out stuff that are gathering and tagging things that you're interested in. So you're curating things. And then the challenger, which was the route or is the route that you took, is like, I'm just going to challenge myself and kind of, and it actually like, it makes sense for everybody when he said it. And, he's still early on in what he was doing when he was going through that, but he gave the kids a handout and everything. So it's kind of funny. You're getting a handout on social
Mhm.
media, but 90% of the kids held on to them, right? Because usually kids will be like, whatever. But yeah, those three areas were very interesting, and it actually made a lot of sense for me to understand, having kids actually think about this, right? Not necessarily like think that it's a bad thing, but think about where their attention is going and why it's going there. I think one of the biggest challenges that he didn't talk about, but I don't think it's like his niche, but like is the vulnerability. How do you get somebody to become vulnerable to to create or to put themselves out there or to do something like that? So I think it goes back to those same age old education strategies of building confidence, right?
Mhm.
And now it's even more a steeper climb, right? So it's not like just giving a presentation in front of your peers in a classroom. Like you're now you have access to a world stage. And if somebody makes the wrong move, then it could go viral for the wrong reasons and such. So, Josh touched on those things, but I think, there's a lot of, power there, but there's also a lot of, I don't know, like it can be a bit scary when you do that. But I think becoming vulnerable, which is very interesting when students are constantly consuming, they're just consuming other people who are vulnerable, right? Like, and they're stepping out, whether they're failing or succeeding. But again, you get a lot of those people out there on social media that are succeeding, in a way where it's monetary or, objectivity or whatever, I've got a Ferrari, blah, blah, blah. If I just put out, my good old Toyota Corolla and I'm just going to, Arby's, then you feel like a failure. But why? It's interesting. It's a huge psychology experiment.
Oh, which I think it's cool that his psych degree and everything is kind of springboarding this. And to that kind of point, this is a totally different direction. I'm going to be vulnerable here in a show that I've watched. I think you watched too. But I won't call you out, so you don't have to share if you don't want to. But it is this kind of rise of this influencer culture. And so The Bachelor and The Bachelorette has been a show that's been on.
Totally watched it. Yep.
Okay, right. So it's been on before social media. And if you don't watch the show, or basically it's a ridiculous show. People fall in love.
What are you talking? Bachelor Nation? Are you not a part of it?
Oh, I am, but I'm saying when you really think about it, it is a ridiculous show.
Absolutely.
But if you look at it from like the good old days with like Trista, the original Bachelorette, and she's still married to Ryan, and all of this, and it was like this really organic experience. Yes, there were cameras and everything, but the people who were on the show were on there for a very authentic experience. Come in the last, especially the last 5 years of the show, and I would say the last 5 years of a lot of this reality has been like, I want to post, or I want to be on television so that I can get paid by companies to promote their products. And so most of the people going on these shows are not going on to authentically find love, which creates all of this ridiculous good quote unquote television drama. But I actually really don't even like the show that much anymore, because it's gone so far away. And just the evolution of that show, though, I feel like is how social media creeps in, and it disrupts what can be a really organic development process for students. And it kind of makes you feel inadequate because your daily life isn't this, travel around the world, glitzy glam, all of this very unrealistic expectations. And so then to your point, you think going to Arby's and driving my old car isn't interesting. So then it's it's trying to feed a certain lifestyle and a certain expectation that is so unrealistic, but you don't even realize that it's not realistic because you don't have normal comparison points.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, what I'm going to challenge a lot of educators that are my age, older, right? I want you to go back and think about the kid in the classrooms in your elementary school, not as a teacher, but you're a student, right? Or you're in middle school or whatever. And I was this kid, and there were windows and you would stare out the window, right? So staring out the window was your escape. Or you might talk to somebody, but they were pretty strict back then in my day anyway, in my experiences. But you could stare out the window, and everybody, a lot of students would stare out the window, right? You're bored, you don't have anything, or draw or whatever. But that's how you would take care of your boredom, and stare out the window. I still remember third grade, Miss Campbell's room, staring out the window. I could tell you because the playground was out there, and you're like, who's out there, Well, now the window is this little digital window, right?
Mm.
And so it's been replaced, but there wasn't, like, there are days where I'm staring out the window, and there was nothing going on, but it was just outside, right? But if you can imagine, like, outside that window, there were clowns, there was a parade every day, there was fireworks, there was, and now, now we can understand what's happening in the little window in front of people, right? Now, I haven't really seen any kids watching clowns or fireworks, but it's the dopamine kick now that they've kicked up, that they can put anything in that window that's going to give you attention, right? So, and you grew up that way. And that's what I really like, the way that Josh kind of put it out there. And he's really cross-generational. He really is. He really understands, and I don't know how, but he understands Gen X. He understands the millennials. He understands Gen Z. One thing, though, that I have noticed about Gen Z, a little bit of a difference between the millennials and Gen Z, is, and maybe they're just not admitting it, but Gen Z is not so much influenced anymore. Like, they can call out a fake influencer or somebody trying. And I think it's just been, it's like anything, it's been overused, right? Like, I can go, the funny thing is, like, Gen Z will make fun of people like sitting on a Corvette that's not theirs, and they'll call them out. They're like, it's not your car or whatever, so it's interesting how it is evolving as well, generationally. But still the dopamine is there, right? And regardless of what the dopamine is. So yeah, I just wanted to imagine that, because I do remember me looking out the window, and then when I see a student like on their phone, like, when I'm like, oh, you have so much potential, there's a piece of me that like gets angry inside, and I'm like, oh, why is this kid on their phone? And then I have to think, well, I was looking out the window and I didn't have what they have. So, you go from there.
Everyone's journey is different, but I'm a huge advocate of boredom.
Yeah.
And that we all need more of it. And boredom looks like, driving in your car with nothing, like no podcast, no music, no anything. And I think I've shared this on the podcast before. When I run, so I'm a big runner. I am I'm in the group of, we call ourselves like purist runners, in that we don't have audio. We run to listen to our breathing and the sights and sounds around us. And it's very visceral experience, and it's not easy because you're not distracted from the pain of running. And I will also add that, like, I am not one of those people that you see out running that look like they're like a bird flying down the road, like, just it's tough for me. Like, I've run marathons and been challenged every step of the way. I do the practice because, I mean, the dopamine is really great afterwards, an endorphin high that you get from running. But the amount of times that run, and for some people it's walking, but being unplugged from anything other than your thoughts has given me so many kind of life-changing moments. One of the times that I moved was immediate. Like, I knew I had to, like, make a big change in my life immediately following a run. And it was that not being plugged in anything. It's your version of staring out the window. And when you are aware, if you're not aware of the fact that you are kind of distracted by your phone, and it's taking all of your attention, it's really hard to make change, because it's just part of your normal routine. And so, and for educators, right, who are just trying to survive the day, and they don't want to, like, blow up the classroom and like make all their kids take out their phone because they know they're going to get a big resistance. It's like Josh's message is good to hear that there's another way around it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I am definitely a challenger of social media, and I don't necessarily agree with Josh's full approach,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, in that I would personally go more the route of the subtraction. But he does that by adding. And for me, that was such a game-changing switch to his message. Is like when you add things to your life that are fun and in real time, in person, you don't feel like you're missing out on anything that's on your phone.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more as an educator you can kind of add
Mm-hmm.
and make learning, and is no call out to educators who are doing amazing work, but it's just like when you can find a way that does get your students engaged and they don't want to be on their phones, you're onto something.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I, like, be experimental in what you do or try, because like now is the time to make
Right.
learning different and spark a change and bring that message to students who may not even be aware of their consumption habits. And doing it in a way that's additive for me was a huge kind of shift, even being a challenger of that big machine.
Mm-hmm.
Is that you can challenge it but approach it from like a more positive way than just
Right.
like it's all bad.
Yeah, I think there is a challenge in adding. I will, and I'm with you there, right? Like that is one thing I kind of questioned. I'm like, okay, so you're a young person, 16, 17 years old. Like you've sought out these dopamine kicks constantly, right? And then maybe you realize it right now, right? But you developed a habit, right? And then, there's only so much time as an educator that I have with a student. So I have to try to figure out different habits. What I see a lot, different habits actually, work into a period of time, right? So, and that's a very difficult thing. So there's one way that I've seen certain educators do this. I don't like this way, and I think this attributes to the stress of students, but who am I to say, right? But it's just jam as much information and as much work into a point where the kids don't have time to be on their phones, right? And I think that's the wrong way to go. But if you don't understand this, well, I don't blame anybody. I don't blame teachers for doing that. But that's what happens, and I think that leads to where students are stressed out, and they procrastinate. But then when they procrastinate in that kind of environment, then you have a very big stress happening. Now you have dopamine that's not really, it's just quick stuff. And then you wake up from it, and then you have tons of work that you missed, right? So, but I see how teachers are trying to figure this out. So my one question that I didn't get to ask Josh, and maybe he doesn't know quite yet, is when you go into this, like teens actually favor YouTube, by the way, over TikTok. There's been studies when they're kind of consuming, but that doesn't mean like TikTok is not prevalent, right? It's very prevalent. But anyway, in any of these pieces, like if you ask a student now to Google it, ask Siri, go on TikTok to try to find your community or an answer to something, or something interesting about something you're interested in business or art or whatever, you run the risk of that student going down the rabbit hole then, right? So yeah, I've done it, right? Like I've been looking up things. I'm like, oh, I need to look up somebody on Instagram because I saw a post, and I look it up, and then 10 minutes later, I'm like 5 reels in, and I'm like, what the hell is going on, right? But how do we, I don't want to say combat, but how do we combat that, right? Like, how do we teach young people to get into the habit where an alarm goes off and says, okay, I got my stuff, where you're able to investigate on a platform like this for a purpose to either curate or create or to challenge, and then get off of it, right? So that I think is the biggest challenge, like for me, is when I'm talking about students, they want to go into business somewhere. So I got a young person who wants to be a real estate agent. Find me like somebody on LinkedIn or TikTok or somewhere who's a real estate agent, and what are they doing, and connect with them, right? Somehow, like interact with them, like a video, comment on their video, try to get something. But when they do that, that takes maybe, a couple of minutes, and then 20 minutes later, they're back into the old habit. I think that's somebody comes up with that. And if there's any listeners out there that has a strategy for that, just a strategy, not the strategy, because there isn't one, you got yourself $1 billion idea, right? Because I think that's the hardest part. Let's use social media, not be used by it. And how do we do that effectively? So I think that was like questioning, how do you do that was something that I wasn't ready to ask Josh, because I don't think he's there yet. But I think that's a legit point that you're also bringing up. It's kind of going deeper into it.
After you hear the initial message, how long does it last, right? Like, how do you, build a totally different habit around social media and technology that you are immersed in? And that is a big, big question that everybody wants a different approach to it. And there's a lot of money in this. I mean, in thinking about schools and software and in technology, how many billions of dollars are wrapped up into that now, and funding for it. For like we brought it in, right? Like one-to-one devices and all of this is it's a huge thing right now for access. And COVID, the pandemic, was like everybody needs to have access to internet, and so it's like it blew up. Like we allowed the floodgates were kind of really open, and to me that was a huge tipping point in the scales of technological consumption, because we weren't allowed for a time, many of us, to interact face to face. And so what did we kind of get ourselves into? And I feel like we're kind of digging out of that now and trying to figure out, like, what rabbit hole did I just put myself into? But when you're younger, you don't have all of those cognitive abilities to sort all that out. You're just thrust into it, and it's going to have effects on your life, whether or not you wanted them there. And so it is like, okay, being aware of it. Now that I'm aware of it, the next step for Josh and anybody working on this is like, how do I recreate the habit?
Yeah.
And how do I add the right things that will last? Because we all have a plate and it has a certain amount of time and space, and many people feel like their plate is so full. So the idea of adding more to it is like, whoa, it's worse than subtracting. But it is almost like you don't even realize that you took things off of the plate before adding it, or that side of the plate just got cleared by you adding something to it. And so I think adding the right things and really diving into community in person, Josh did say this, we're big advocates for it. Nothing replaces in real time presence and educational experiences. And I will say that, Josh did say that his favorite classes were the ones that were in person, even though he was maybe thinking about other stuff at times. But that human connection and being in real time is just going to continue to be ever more important. And I think education, it's like, if you remember taking like typing classes, or like how do you use a word processor in English class? I can remember all those things. It's like, we're going to need classes around like how to make the most out of your connection to technology.
Right.
Those need to be in the school system. It's not like personal finance for all. It's like technology and social media for all. How do you be deliberate with your usage of technology? And that needs to come younger, before you're finishing your senior year of college, and you have this epiphany that, oh my gosh,
right.
I'm in a machine and it's well ingrained and I'm being used.
Right.
Like, I don't want people's wake up call to be that. I'm glad Josh had it and he's sharing his message, but like the wake up call needs to be sooner, and parents and educators can be a huge advocate for like the detriments of not addressing that issue, and like, you know, it being a cultural shift in how we use it, and starting with people understanding the pros, cons, consequences, opportunities with allowing technology in your life. That is kind of the stage I think we're at.
Yeah. I'm going to throw a weird curveball in here, which will probably be another episode. But I did catch the fact that when Josh went to college, the motivation dropped. And I see this now, especially with seniors at this time of year, when they're like, I'm done with high school, I'm going to go to college and everything's going to change. And what I heard, and this is just Josh's experience, I don't want to say it's everybody's experience, was it is the same. There's still the class and the structure are different. We'll have to talk about that on another episode because I want to talk to more college students about this. That piqued my interest. And I just like the way he answered that question, just authentically, and just like, yeah, in my experience, it wasn't. So with that being said, how do you wrap up this wrap up with Josh, Alli? What are some final thoughts you have?
I would say, you know, his catchphrase is humanizing the internet. And, you know, I think when I think of kicking off 2024 with the Disrupt Education podcast, I think about how are we humanizing education? And I think that is one of the most disruptive topics out there right now because of AI, because of technology, because of the pendulum is so far sitting in what software are we adding to the classroom? What's our next device going to be? And how are we assigning homework on this integrated system? And it's what smart boards or what's the next, you know, screen technology are we going to put into the classrooms? It's like, we need more conversations around how are we humanizing the classroom? How are we connecting with students and, you know, changing our relationship with social media to be proactive instead of reactive? And there's not a better message that I think we could have started in our first kind of series here with 2024. I know I was so excited to have this conversation with Josh. It's just the beginning for him, and it's just the beginning of the year for the podcast. And so if you're enjoying these types of conversations and deep dives into what are really, really important issues in education, you need to subscribe.
100%.
You need to like and subscribe and follow us on all of the social media platforms. We get our information from the guests. Guess what? You can find us on TikTok, on Instagram, on LinkedIn. There are websites that you search Disrupt Education podcast, they'll all come up.
We're there. We're
there.
there to help you curate your ideas. How about that? Challenge them. And obviously create things. Well, I love this conversation, and this definitely won't be the end of this conversation. And if you have any other kind of ideas and such, give us a shout out here. But we do appreciate you guys listening, everybody out there. I know that 2024, as we're kicking it off here, we've went 3 in a row with amazing guests so far. Who knows how crazy this is gonna get? But this is gonna be a great year still. You know, really appreciate you guys. And like Alli said, hit that subscribe button, share us out with some people who may need to hear this. We're talking real about education this year, and authentic, real stuff and not fluff. How about that? We'll start there. We'll disrupt some more. Thank you all. For Alli Privitt, I'm Peter Hostrawser. Appreciate you guys, everybody listening. And we'll catch you next time on the Disrupt Education Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of the Disrupt Education Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Are you ready to disrupt the educational arena you're a part of? For more ways to get involved in the work we do here at Disrupt Education, check us out at disrupteducation.co or find us on LinkedIn at Peter Hostrawser or Alli Privitt.
Our mission here is to help facilitate and amplify changes in the educational system through local initiatives and help you scale them into community movements. Our building network of disruptors in education are working to move beyond scores and grades as the only measure for student learning. If your school district, college, campus, or organization is looking for facilitators of this work, reach out on our website or social media.
And if you have any thoughts or feedback on this week's episode or any episode, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries, taking risks, and most importantly, disrupting education.